Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's pre-divorce webinar titled Is Now the Right Time? This webinar is jointly organized by the Law Society Pro Bono Office and the Family Justice Courts. I am Liyen, your moderator. Before we begin, here are some important matters I'd like you to take note of. Feel free to ask any question during the webinar. You can use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. You will remain anonymous and your questions will only be seen by the organizer. We will address them throughout the talk. The link to download the relevant materials for today's talk will be available in the chat function during the webinar. The link will also be provided in the follow-up email sent to you tomorrow. Please note that this discussion is not intended to constitute legal advice. You should consult a lawyer if you require specific legal advice. With that, I am very delighted to introduce our speakers for today, Ms. Susan Tay and Ms. Sylvia Tan. Hi, Susan.
Hi, everyone.
Susan is the family law expert on today's panel. She is the founder of OTP Law Corporation and co-founder of Practice Forte Private Limited. She has been a lawyer for 34 years. Her primary focus is family and matrimonial law. She is also a certified mediator and a trained parenting coordinator with the Family Justice Court. Susan, welcome back. Tell us a bit about your work, and this talk today.
Okay. Yes, before I tell you guys more, let me take this opportunity to just say how great it is to be back here. Liyen, was it only in March this year that we did the Divorce and You webinar?
Yes.
So I hope the participants there are here today because
me too.
This second workshop is it's a place where we are going to dwell deeper from what we talked about previously. About myself, okay, so as Liyen has explained, I do wear many hats, but for the purpose of today's workshop, I will wear the hat of a lawyer. I am into my 34th year of practice and witnessed in the past 3 decades quite a fair bit of changes to the family justice court system. So 30 years ago, when I was a young lawyer in my 20s, I was mainly what I call a warrior lawyer. I fight in court for my clients' rights. In 2013, I saw the transformation where mediation and counseling were introduced more into the family justice system. And then today, therapeutic justice, where the courts are looking at cases through the lens of care, right? So 34 years ago, first and foremost, a litigation lawyer. Today, I like to see myself more as a mediation advocate, right? The difference between the two is the topic for today. I will share some more what really are the differences. And it's also precisely because of this difference that we are sharing our experience to participants here on how to avoid acrimonious divorce, okay? With proper planning, before you even think about starting the process, preparation, communication, we can actually really avoid acrimony. Not only that, we can hopefully preserve the relationships.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And for that reason, I'm very eager to begin today's discussion. I believe that what is going to be shared is going to be extremely useful to the participants. But before we do that, it is my pleasure to introduce psychologist and counselor, Ms. Sylvia Tan. Hope that Sylvia is able to come online. Okay, I'm not sure if, here she is. I think she's coming. Hey, Sylvia. Okay, you need to unmute yourself, Sylvia.
Hello.
Hi,
Sorry.
hi.
Hi.
Okay, I'm so excited to introduce Sylvia. She is the director and principal psychologist of Sylvia Tan Psychology Consultancy. She's been a counseling psychologist for the past 18 years and specializes in divorce counseling, co-parenting counseling, custody evaluation reports, and reunification therapy. So, Sylvia, welcome. And I am curious, how did you come to specialize in divorce and co-parenting counseling?
Okay. Hi, Liyen. Thank you for your question. And I'm sorry I'm late. I wasn't. Take up the notes on. Anyway, how I came to specializing in divorce and counseling was, well, before I started my private practice just last year, but I've actually been practicing for a long time. But before I started my private practice, I was working for family justice courts and for many years, and also the social service agencies. So that's when we did a lot of work around divorce work. You know, I was doing my custody evaluation then, and I also did like counseling for you know, for couples who are going through divorce as well, the mandatory counseling in the court, in the court counseling services. So so that's how I started. But before then, I used to be living in Australia. So yeah, so it was around then too that I started to see clients who were coming in needing help with their marriage and divorce. So yeah, so I've been around for a long time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's excellent to know. So we're really excited to jump straight into the talk today. And I'd like to begin by reminding our audience of something we discussed at the last talk. So just to link the two, which is that the Family Justice Court now has a new approach towards divorce matters. You might have read about it in the news in the last few months. And it's called the therapeutic justice approach. So Susan, maybe just quickly remind us what the therapeutic justice approach is, because earlier in your intro, you did do a very nice, like 3-decade development of family law in Singapore, how it has changed. Tell us a bit about therapeutic justice.
Okay, so I'll try my best, all right? You know, this changing landscape, right? What is obvious to us is that more and more the courts, the authorities, even societies, they are calling for a more conciliatory approach when dealing with difficult life's decision, right? Divorce is definitely one of these kind of decisions. And what is this change that they are looking at? And I warn everybody that this is actually very drastic changes required when we adopt this whole new approach we call the therapeutic justice system, right? And this change is not just about the system, it's also about the laws, it's about mindsets, and definitely the players in this whole divorce, for example, divorce process. Players are like judges, lawyers, even the parties themselves. Now, what does this mean, right? Therapeutic justice through the lens of care. Practically, what does it really take? What are we expecting of the system? I have dealt with this, as you can see from the slide. I split the process into 3 stages. Stage 1, this pre-divorce stage is where parties have not taken out the application, but has been thinking about it, right? Now, therapeutic justice provides access, make available to these people multidisciplinary professionals like counseling, Sylvia, legal advice, me, right? Therapy, mediation, even adjudication for parties who need them. Why? Because through these experts, you can understand the consequences of a divorce, right? And this consequence is not just on yourself, it's also on the children and on your family members. So that's stage 1. We go into stage 2, which is the divorce process itself. And I can't describe this any better than how family justice courts did it on their website, right? Problem solving, not litigation, is the core focus of the therapeutic justice system. Now, again, another massive mindset change. When you go to court, it's no longer it's not encouraged that you go there to fight the other party. That means you're not to treat each other as adversaries. What you are supposed to do is to go in there as joint problem solvers. Okay, this is a massive mindset change, because you don't go in there to talk about, hey, your rights versus my rights. You go in there to say, okay, let's think about working together to make sure things are okay. You start to problem solve. We come to the last stage, which is what happens after the divorce itself, post-divorce. Okay, at post-divorce, right, what the system hopes to provide is a way to heal, a way to restore, and then you can recast into a positive future. Okay, so there will be support system for you to grieve over the loss, say, of your marriage. And through that support system, right, you hopefully can look into the future with, well, hope and optimism. You know, you can stop being husband and wife, but if you have kids, you're going to be parents for the rest of your life. Okay, it's lifelong. So you need to have that positive mindset so that you can co-parent effectively. That is TJ in the gist, Liyen.
Wow. Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, it will be really interesting to see in the coming years how that is going to pan out in the family justice. Because I think many of us, especially, you know, if we have friends who maybe had gotten a divorce some years back, or even relatives, the idea of it is meant to be acrimonious. Right? It's always, you know, somebody did something terrible and then the aggrieved party feels like a victim. To imagine all of that just out the window, regardless of who made a mistake, we're here to solve the problem. I mean, I can immediately imagine really the court's focus must be for the family to, like you say, I think being at peace for healing, especially for the children's benefit. Yeah.
Yes.
But it was interesting that you mentioned early in the stage at pre-divorce, already counseling is one of the things that are made available to parties. So what do you think, Sylvia, at this early stage, right, before anything's even started, is it relevant, and how will it benefit someone to attend counseling, you know, before or maybe during divorce proceedings? Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Liyen. Yeah. So maybe I can share from the perspective of what my clients say, like in terms of the experience of coming for counseling before the divorce, before commencing the divorce. So some of the benefits that they've shared with me is that they could able to help them work through some of the confusion that they may have about the divorce. So for sometimes people may not be fully ready into deciding whether they want to divorce or not. So when they come into counseling, they can really talk about, to understand really what really has happened in the marriage, and then to decide whether they want to go ahead with divorce as well. And another experience that most some people go through, and very commonly some people experience, is this feeling of feeling alone. You know, when you are thinking about divorce, you know, you feel quite ashamed, and maybe you don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to talk to family members, but you have all these pent-up emotions that you need to process and talk about it. So therefore it's important that that they can you know, talk about the emotions with somebody to help them to do that. So I'm just giving an example of a client that I've seen before. When she first came into counseling, she just discovered that her husband had an affair, you know, and she was actually going through, like, she experienced really anxiety attacks, and she was feeling nauseous, and you know, having heart palpitations. She can't sleep, and so she came in and to help her to manage those emotions and work through that, find skills to how to calm herself, and then after that we continued to talk about her marriage and preparing her, thinking about whether she wants to go ahead with divorce or not. You know, so that's an example. And then another benefit is that when both parties are maybe ready and they can start to talk about maybe co-parenting early on, how they can do things for the kids together. Yeah, so these are some of the benefits to come in before divorce. Yeah.
You know, earlier you mentioned that before you set up a private practice, you worked in a court quite a bit. So I'm curious, in that scenario, most times by the time you get to meet these clients, I imagine maybe the divorce process has started, or for some, I don't know, it could be, I don't know whether you'll be involved in like court mandated counseling sessions.
Yes,
do you feel that there's a difference when parties come in at that stage?
Yeah, so that stage is a little bit later already. So that counseling, the court counseling, is actually very, very brief. It's not a very long, you know, you get maybe a few sessions, you know, so within a period of time. So you don't get the full depth of the time that you need to actually go through, you know, process more feelings or talk through certain things much longer. So and by then the papers have already been filed. The divorce papers have already been filed. So people, some of them, the emotions have already escalated at the point in time. Yeah. So I find it's a big difference if you actually come for counseling even before before the divorce is filed. There is a difference, yeah. The difference is that by the time people have gone to counseling first and then they file for divorce, they're actually more ready, the more ready stage, yeah.
Okay, that's interesting to know. Okay, let's, what about you, Susan? Before I move on to the next topic, I was about to move on to the psychological stages, but Susan, I'm curious because from your experience, I imagine, I could be wrong, majority of your clients come in, I don't know, maybe you should tell us, would they have gone through counseling? What are the percentage, of people who have made the effort to see a counselor first? And how different is the experience for them when they come to see the lawyer?
Perhaps at the end of what I wanted to share, I will tell about this one case where the client came and see me, the person she was, and then came and see me again 3 months later after she worked with, actually this was a case Sylvia and I collaborated after she worked with Sylvia. Yeah, but anyway, I wanted to answer your question to say that it is still not common. It is still not common that a client came in and say, oh, I've gone through counseling, I have clarity now, I know exactly what I want to do, okay? I want to elaborate a bit on what Sylvia said about so that to illustrate the importance of counseling, okay? Sylvia talked about two situations. One, I call it the too early stage, where clients are still pretty confused, they don't have clarity, right? The other one is maybe the too late stage, just for easy comparison, where emotions have run so high, it's a bit hard to control that. There's a lack of communication, lack of trust. And I want to talk to participants about how that makes working with the lawyer quite difficult to make sure that your divorce process is smooth. In the too early stage, right, usually you are still very confused, there's no clarity. So you sometimes cannot even present your facts accurately. All right. Sometimes I tell the client, hey, I need this information. Can you go and get that? They don't even have the energy to try and retrieve those information. So what you tell us sometimes is not, well, I wouldn't say not true, but not accurate. Example, I have X dollars, but maybe you actually have X plus 2, maybe X minus 5. I need Y dollars, but maybe it's more or less. Now, with this kind of inaccurate information, firstly, I cannot advise you properly. Worse, sometimes I advise you wrongly, okay? Oh, you have too much, don't need this, don't need that, right? That's one thing. The other thing is when I present your case in court, later on the court finds out that, this information is not quite right. What? The impression the judge has of this person will not be good, for sure. There will be names, it's like, if they are kind, they will say, oh, maybe you're confused. They are not kind, they think that this is lying, right? Then there is the too late stage, where emotions have already run so high. I want to illustrate this with this reunion dinner case. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It was very publicized, okay? Over the issue of whether the son should spend reunion dinner with mom or dad on the eve of Chinese New Year, this case went all the way to the Court of Appeal. All the way to the Court of Appeal, yes. Senior counsel was involved on this one issue, right? They couldn't even say, okay, when somebody say, oh, maybe you have 2 dinners lah. One parent say, no, that's not healthy for the child. Down to the extent they couldn't agree. And that is when 2 parties have already perhaps let their emotions run to a stage where there's lack of trust, lack of compromise. This case involves a lot of money, involves a lot of time. And imagine the impact it has on the child.
Yes.
Chinese New Year should be a happy occasion, but for this child, maybe it will always be something he dreads, something he fears, something he's anxious about, right? Because he knows there's going to be conflict. That is why if counseling can give you some clarity, can ease your emotions, you can, effectively, you can really save a lot of angst, a lot of resources fighting a case in court. I just want to illustrate that. Yeah. And then this last case, right, about this lady that I met, she came to me that time, she was distraught. She's been in a relationship, she felt abused for 5 years. She was still very, very confused. And it took her 3 months. She went away for 3 months to do counseling. By the time she came back, it was almost like a changed person, because even her face looked slightly different, She was very decisive. She was very clear. I think she knows what she wants. So I think those kind of things are very important.
Agree. Sylvia, anything to add?
Yeah, I want to add on to what Susan was talking about, the counseling, the too late stage of Chinese New Year case, like I'm thinking about the children, because she did say about the impact on the children. And I know that for parents who are actually coming counseling early, they actually start talking about the children actually quite early on. So often when all these co-parenting issues are discussed earlier, parents will have greater awareness about how not to further cause further harm on the kids, So especially if they're not aware or not able to learn how to manage their emotions or learn how to not, triangulate the child into the conflict, then that kids can be protected. But often when parents don't seek help early and let things go off the rails, and that's when it becomes too late. And I've seen kids who at the tail end, maybe like gone through rounds of divorce processes and many court applications and went all the way up to high court kind of cases. These cases, the kids are actually really quite damaged by then, quite affected. So it's not easy to help them, but it will take a long process to undo,
Yeah,
so
and that sounds like if any of our participants or anyone is thinking about saving the cost of counseling, later on it's going to be by going through the acrimony and all that. I think if eventually you still have to send your kid to seek help, if you don't get it right in the beginning. And it just occurred to me as we were all talking about this, that actually for the past few divorce webinars, we have been introducing this concept of counseling in greater and greater detail. I really hope that by now, participants have a much clearer idea that it is really not about reconciliation, which I think was a very traditional concept. I think in the past, even for myself, when someone wants to, I want to divorce my husband or something, and we think about counseling, it's all about, why don't you all repair, the relationship? But now it's actually much more, it's much broader than that. And sometimes it actually leads you to a quicker decision to leave. But as you say, with a much clearer mind, and I really hope that by now this message is quite clear as to the benefits and the need for counseling. Yeah, thank you both for that. Okay, moving on, let's touch on the psychological stages of marriage breakdown. Now, this is interesting because in all our past divorce talks, we have not really discussed the psychological impact that it has on an individual, whether you're the one who you want to be the applicant or the defendant, or even on the children, which we will touch on later. So Sylvia, maybe I remember that when a traumatic event occurs in a person's life, there is this thing, I read about it, called the 5 stages of grief. So in a case of a marriage breakdown, I don't know, is it the same thing?
Yeah, well, it's kind of similar. Your marriage is like it's life and death, right? For some people, like marriage is you go into marriage thinking that you'll go through the rest of your life with this person. So when the marriage is coming to an end, it's almost like losing somebody. So we can sort of draw on the theory on the stages to apply it to divorce process as well. So I'm going to talk through, I'll explain about this grief cycle. Okay, so there's basically 5 stages, okay? Or what these 5 stages of grief, it came from a study of this psychiatrist came up with this model, okay? And she studied thousands of people who have experienced what the emotional experience of losing someone that they love, okay? And so these 5 stages typically are, denial, the first stage, then anger, then it's a bargaining stage, depression stage, and acceptance stage. Okay, so I'm going to go through how that actually applies to the divorce, to the marital breakdown. So the very first stage, okay, is the denial stage. So this stage can actually happen way before even the divorce itself. Okay, and this is a stage where people may start to notice some cracks in the marriage. So it may be like, you got married, and then after a few years later, you sort of see, hey, how come your spouse got all these problems, and you didn't know about it before, and then you start to question yourself, hey, did I marry the right person or not? You know, some of these questions start to run through your mind. But because you got married and you go, nah, you don't want to deal, you don't want to think about it, you don't want to deal with it. So there's some elements of the denial in that part, not wanting to think that there could be issues in a marriage. And of course, sometimes it could also be, there's also element of shock in this denial stage. And this happens when maybe there's discovery of affair. Of course, that is often a very terrible experience. So people often describe that they're really shocked that this thing has happened. Okay, and there's also then comes with feelings of confusion, like you don't know what's happened, why the marriage has been like this. So this is typically, an example of the first stage. Then the second stage, comes about when the first stage is probably not resolved. Okay, when all the feelings of denial or shock is probably not resolved just yet. Okay, and that's when the problems in the marriage starts to deepen. You may have more arguments with one another. Okay, you start to increasing frustration and anger. Okay, maybe divorce starts to be thrown in the arguments. You start to talk about it between yourselves, or threatening that. So this is the escalation part. Okay, the intensifying of the thing. So this stage can actually might go on for some time. After that, the next stage is the bargaining stage. Okay, so this is the stage is where maybe one party may really had it ready and just decided that, yes, I'm gonna go ahead and think about, go ahead and find a lawyer. So this could be finding a lawyer stage, making some inquiries, finding out what it means. Okay. And then in the process, you may start to wonder, hey, do I really want this or not? So you may be bargaining with yourself, whether do I really want to go ahead and divorce? You start to feel maybe ambivalent, you're not sure where you're at. Okay. Or it could be a stage where divorce is on the table. We both kind of, talk about one part, one party may have filed for it or even start to talk about it, and then the other party may not be willing. So there's a lot of bargaining between both parties about whether one wants to leave, one wants to stay. So there's a lot of arguments about that. Okay, so this is the bargaining stage, and it can be really, really intense. Okay, and a lot of feelings can come in this stage, right? You can have a lot of frustration, sadness, and you can, this is when people start to feel they need a lot of support. Okay, so this is when they start talking to their friends. They consult their family members, and sometimes families come in to interfere and try to chime in to save the marriage or not. Okay, sometimes this is a stage where people go into counseling to try to save the marriage of some sort.
I suppose at this stage, maybe I don't know. Would it be when you say counseling, like a discernment counseling would be relevant at this stage?
Yeah. So discernment counseling. So this is a kind of counseling, as what Liyen was saying. It's not specifically to save your marriage. Okay. So this is a counseling that's a bit unique. It's really about to help both parties to come to an understanding, to get better clarity about what has contributed to the state of the marriage. Okay, and understanding each individual's contribution to what the problem of the marriage is, and then is to help the couple to decide better, to give them better clarity on what to do next. Okay, so usually with discernment counseling, the goals of it is to reach either of these three outcomes. Okay, so one possible option is to after the counseling ready, they may decide to either stay status quo, okay, or they may decide to divorce. Or option 3, which is to decide to, go for 6 months of counseling, couples counseling to save the marriage, and then decide to divorce. Okay, so this is a part that I feel a lot of people are missing, that they didn't go through this period to decide. Yeah. So this is a discernment counseling. Yeah.
And then, so even after they've gone through this, it's possible to still hit depression state?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. The depression state is tough when you feel like really sad, like there's sort of sadness about the end of the, that coming to see all the, people sort of realize, oh, how come the marriage has come to this stage, right? You start to grieve the loss, all the effort that you put into the years of the marriage, or you start to grieve about the children, and you worry about the kids, and so this is a stage. I'm gonna call depression stage that can come earlier also. It's not like depression only come at fourth stage. You can also sort of feel that quite early on.
Right.
Okay, but based on the grief model, that's when the reality of perhaps of the state of the marriage is you start to feel really sad about the loss of it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, then that's the last stage is the acceptance stage. Okay, so this is when maybe when one or both parties, usually hopefully both, will start to realize that okay, well, there's no turning back anymore, and realizing that the marriage is not salvageable, and then they agree to come to the mind acceptance that the marriage is over. So this is a stage that sometimes people they start to agree on terms of the divorce maybe, and then they start to make plans for moving forward. They start to be able to face reality, like embrace that they can do it on their own. They can have the support from the family, and they can move on, or they can start to look forward. So this is usually the last stage of where the marital breakdown will be.
That's really interesting. And it actually, as I was listening to that, it made me think about some of the people that I might have met in my life, right? Whether it's relatives or older people or younger people. Would it be fair to say that for different people, they can go through these stages over different periods of time? For some people, I don't know, it could be years. And because I have friends who are very decisive, I cannot imagine that it would take them very, very long to feel these things, and then I don't know, make a certain decision. But then again, maybe decisiveness doesn't mean you don't experience all of that thing, all of those feelings. Maybe you made a decision before you reached depression or acceptance. That could be that could be interesting as well. So different people, I suppose, go through it over different periods of time, right? It's not necessarily like 1 year.
No, definitely not. Everyone is very different. Everybody's experience and journey is very different. So this is not textbook, okay? Doesn't mean must be like one anger stage. It could be anger and then denial, So again, it's like grief cycle as well. We say it's not linear. You can go back and forth, but definitely acceptance would be the last stage. I mean, that's the consistent experience for most people. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And I suppose that's why it's important to seek professional help, because I think individually, maybe we on our own or even with friends may not be able to properly identify where we are at psychologically. And like Susan, you mentioned earlier, that really can affect decision making.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So with all this in mind, how then will a person know when they are ready to start divorce proceedings? I mean, with the stages, they don't run in a linear order. 1 minute I feel depressed, next minute I'm bargaining. I may or may not be seeing a counselor. So how will I know that, okay, I think now I should begin divorce proceedings? So, Susan, do you want to go first?
I mean, this question, I guess, is best for Sylvia, but I think even more so, the one person who will know whether they are ready or not, at the end of the day, still boils down to that person making the application, like my client, right? When I look at them, I think, okay, they may not be at the right phase, all right? Maybe lack of clarity, maybe too emotional. But at the end of the day, when they say, okay, Susan, I am ready, I'll take it at face value that they are ready. Of course, having said that, what happens is that when I do the fact finding, when I tell them some decisions have to be made and I can tell that they are not, I will also tell them, perhaps you're not ready yet.
Okay, interesting. Okay, this leads nicely into before I do that, Sylvia, what do you think? When is someone ready?
Yeah. Okay. So again, there's no timeline. Okay. I wouldn't say like, oh,
Or what about like
we-
a signpost? How
Okay.
now I'm a participant.
Yes.
How will I know that? Okay,
Okay.
maybe now is like a good time.
Yeah. So one good place to think about. I mean, two signposts. One of it is that you will have no more ambivalent feeling. You don't have this doubt anymore. You know, you're pretty clear that okay, that's it. You really sure that you've gone through all the years and thinking about all the help you've gone through. Maybe you've gone for counseling really, and then after all that, there's still no change, and you're being really clear that that's it. You're ready, and then the next stage is really thinking about your life. You're mentally prepared for your life after divorce. So you have thought through. Thought through the question about whether are you able to survive or you can cope on your own? I think that's a very important question, because if you feel secure, if you feel that I think I can manage, I think the kids will be okay, then you have a peace about that, or I've got enough support around me, and then yes, you're ready. Okay, so yeah, it does take certain. It might take some time to actually get to this stage. Then again, I've also got people who are, after many years, like they've been tolerating they've been staying in the marriage for many years for the kids. Actually, they just couldn't. They've been tolerating, and then until when the kids are older, then they thought, okay, that's not very divorce. But then that brings up another layer of anxiety. Still, they still have a lot of feelings to work through. So sometimes even by the time they file and ready, they're still not ready. So yeah, again, it all depends.
I suppose that's why it's linked to the 5 stages of grief, because like you say, it's a huge, quite a traumatic event for anybody to have to go through that, even if they made the decision on their own.
Yeah.
I also
right.
just perhaps
Susan.
a case study that I had this case very long ago, and that actually supports Sylvia when she said it really depends. I had a case where I acted for an almost 70-year-old lady. She tolerated her husband's infidelity for decades. One day something happened and the husband slapped her one time. Hey, this is it, I'm divorcing you. And then she said, I asked her, how come she can tolerate it? Well, what is that moment that says, okay, I'm ready to divorce, this is it, finish, So sometimes it really happens for different people at different time, I think.
Yeah, interesting. And the trigger is
yes.
different for different people.
Yeah, and what it means for them, right? What it means about what it means to be divorcee, like the feelings attached to it, and the readiness to be having this new identity, and it takes another process to embrace or to come to terms with it too, and it's not easy, it's really hard. Yeah.
Okay. Before we move on to discuss the war mode, it sounds very interesting. I just want to let participants know that the second half of our talk, we really want to equip you with skills like broaching the question. We try to get you to think about how you're going to broach the question with your children, with your spouse, and some of the other application issues, like how do you actually prepare for it. So stay with us, and after we discuss the war mode and the peace mode, just to signpost the talk for you guys, we will be talking about things you should and should not be doing pre-divorce and things like that. Okay, so with that, let's move to the war mode. I believe this term might have been coined by you, Susan, or was it the court? So tell us a bit more about it. A brief description of what you mean and the acrimony that takes place in court.
In short, right, the war mode is where everything bad about litigation, that will happen in that war mode, right? Afraid that the adversarial system, meaning you go there, you fight the other party, will feel this war mode. Okay. Before that, a small refresher, a very short one. I think at the previous webinar, we talked about there are 2 stages to divorce. One is the first part of the divorce application will be about your marriage, Oh, has it really broken down? Can it be saved? If it cannot be saved, okay, a divorce will be granted. The second part of the process will be devoted to resolving all the ancillary issues, right? All the issues incidental to the marriage, children, money, maintenance, okay, stuff like that. Now, you can fight one stage, which is rarer, the stage 1, the divorce stage, or you can fight the second stage. But war mode at its worst is when parties fight both stages. Having said that, in many stage B kind of proceedings, when it relates to children, that can also be very harming. What are all the bad things about war mode? Can I just have the next slide where we talk about the war mode?
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, first, you know, when you go to court, you fight the other party. Definitely, you need to prepare your case, right? A lot of resources is devoted to gathering evidence. I contribute more, I should get more, he contribute less. So the evidence is against him, for me. When it comes to children, right, it will be evidence that I'm a better parent, he's a lousy dad, she's a terrible mom. So imagine this kind of evidence being presented to court. It will definitely evoke hurt and pain. No matter what kind of a strong man you are, you will feel it, okay? Or strong women, right? So it is inevitable. When you talk about issues like parents or children, it is, you know, it's burying your head in the sand when you think children are not going to be affected just because you don't tell them, right? It's not like that, right? Eventually, it will become, okay, they will get to know it. It will have orders that's going to affect them. Who has access? Who has care and control? So the children will get involved. They will start to hear the mudslinging, okay, and they will be hurt. Many times, this kind of hurt cannot go away. And I tell you, till the day they die, the hurt is lingering there somewhere, right? And because the parties need to have a winning case, after a while, because you build your evidence, you kind of get addicted to building the evidence, you know. It never quite stops.
Yeah, I see what you mean, yeah.
You may start bending the truths. And that's definitely not a great thing to do when you're facing the court, all right? Truths, half-truths, white lies, right? So how can that be good? So many clients always ask me, you know, which comes to the last part, right? Hey, Susan, what are my chances in court? I can tell you, in family disputes, sometimes you don't know what kind of evidence they will turn up, you know. Suddenly out of the blue, there's one incident, oh, that you hit the child, or you know, that you did this, you did that. And I can tell you one thing is certain, is that the outcome will be uncertain. The other thing that is certain is that the experience will likely be bad. Okay, back to outcomes, right? So when I this is the other thing that can be startling to the people listening in. Through my experience, whenever I have cases going all the way to court, the outcomes, what the court orders can very often be not what either of them wants. Okay,
which means neither one wins.
Correct. Neither one really won this outcome. I give you one case that I did, right? It's about a husband and wife, father and mother, fighting over this house, right? The mother, who has care and control of the 3 kids, say, hey, I need the house. I need a roof over our heads. The father said, look, my business failed. Okay, I'm running out debts, right? And I need to sell the house because I need to pay off the debts. If I become a bankrupt, it's not good for anybody. They cannot agree. So we had to go to court. Yes, the court ordered for the house to be sold. But the problem is the share that was awarded to the husband was so low that he couldn't pay his debts. He can't even buy another place. What happened? In the end, they both did not sell the house. They both continued to live in that house, separate rooms. Eventually, because all the problems start surfacing, right? You know, imagine if the husband goes into bankruptcy, it will affect maintenance also.
Yeah.
Eventually, they really put their heads together and say, okay, let's solve this. They decided that the husband's share of the house will be given to the wife. The wife will use a loan, CPF, some cash, pay the husband. The husband then use the money to buy another house. He then structured the loan repayment by installments. We did go back to court, okay, to get this sorted. but this time the application is by consent, right? Both parties consent. So it's short. It's not resource
draining.
Correct. And this all happened because they reversed their roles from adversaries to joint problem solvers. They didn't need the court to tell them what to do. They decided, okay, this is how we do it. This is best. And this is the kind of solutions that will endure, right? It will become long lasting. You don't regret it because it's a decision that will fulfill both parties' interests.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, this is an excellent example. And I'd like to ask this question on behalf of a participant, Susan. I mean, on the face of it, I must say, when I first saw the question, I thought, okay, she's asking about maintenance or something. But I'm curious, if a client comes to you and because to be fair, many of us in their day-to-day, these are the issues that they are faced with. These are the things they're thinking about, right? And then they'll be thinking, wow, you tell me come and problem solve, but my relationship, my day-to-day relationship is such a bad place. So I come to the lawyer and I say that, look, my husband only, this is a question from a participant, right? My husband only contributes 1,000 a month for 25 years of marriage with 2 kids. And now my husband has stopped working for 2 years. And I have been working hard to support the entire household, right? And now I'm told that the husband has the right to share 50% of my savings if we get a divorce. So, I mean, there is a legal answer to it, but you know, someone comes to you like that, a client, how would you approach? Because now I'm really upset, right? Already I survived 25 years and my husband's done nothing. I've been working so hard. I saved all this money. Now the other way around, I have to share all my savings with my spouse.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly the mindset change. When she asks a question like that, right, it's still about my rights and his rights. How come he has a right to this? How come he never do this? That is my right that he must contribute maintenance this way. And this is not right that he takes the half of my savings. Okay, it's how you look at the scenario and you feel enraged. It's not fair. Justice becomes my rights versus your rights. Okay. What is the whole new way of looking at this we are proposing is that you come from the needs space. What is it that you need? Okay, what is it that he needs? Right? What then are the options to fulfill those needs? I know it sounds very highfalutin, like, okay, what really is this needs thing? Why is it different? I mean, I have been doing this for 25 years. Suddenly you tell me it's about needs. My kids all grow up already. They don't need much now. Right? So, but the court also is about being fair. Not just about, okay, perhaps you don't need this now, but if the fair and equitable division is about contribution, what you have done, right? The courts will also look at, okay, what you have done. And the fact that you supported the family for 3 years when he couldn't, what happened? It's not just about the blame game. There are so many reasons why a person is out of the job. Immediately, you want to think that it's him being irresponsible, right? But perhaps it's not like that. So in this peace mode, we are not giving you the answers. We are finding ways for you to find out why. And that is actually where I'm going to explain when we talk about peace mode. Okay.
Yes.
Part of what I'm going to explain is to help parties, right? Perhaps understand the underlying reasons, not just what is the surface. This question is quite surface. Maintenance is like that. Today is like that. You know, but it perhaps is not so black and white. And at the peace mode part, perhaps I can try to explain it more.
Yeah, actually, it's a terrific time to move on to the peace mode. So let's move on.
Okay.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about the peace mode, how it's different. Yeah, and maybe how that would help answer this lady's question, or actually it could be a guy. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. The peace mode. Next slide, please, if you can. Yes. So this peace mode, right, you will see, okay, it is about communication, honest and open. It's about sharing and endure, to find an enduring solution, seek consensus, avoid fights. You will see each and every of the activities, right? You will need the active participation of the parties. When you go to court, it's about my lawyers doing their job. Peace mode is a lot about you helping to do the job also. Immediately, I can already sense that the participants say, I can't even get along with him. You want me to sit in the, you want me to participate actively? We already broken, okay? The communication, blah, 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 right? This is where I want to further explain the process. How the process can actually help broken relationships, okay? Instead of the war mode that can only make it worse, peace mode can help. I will talk about negotiations and I will talk about private mediations, okay? Negotiations, by definition, everybody knows, two people sit down, talk things through. But in the divorce setting, it is usually done with lawyers. And in certain circumstances, right, the counselor will also be present, okay? In collaborative family practice, actually counselor, lawyers, and even a finance person can be part of that team to negotiate. You know, the finance person, because she's very good at advising, okay, your financial situation is like this, what can be done, what cannot be done, right? So negotiations. If I am to help a client in this negotiation process, I call myself a mediation advocate, or I call myself a negotiation facilitator, right? Before even any meetings with the other parties, my job is to sit down with the clients, then we talk about her needs. If this person come and tell me, hey, I paid $1,000, blah, 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 so we'll talk about her needs. And from there, for example, who's going to take care of my kids, who's going to give me financial support, right? From there, we will then look at all the options. Oh, roof over your head, we can do this, we can rent, we can buy a smaller place, we can take over his share. Now, why, when this is all explored, what you really go to the expert for is the navigation, because it is a system. That's the part where you're the most unclear about. You don't know how it moves, right? The justice system, I don't get involved once in my lifetime, maybe, right? So you get this expert who is familiar with the system to help you navigate, to get to the place where you want to be, which is to satisfy most of your needs. Right? We got that sorted. We have communications with the other party. We set a date, we set a venue, we sit down and talk. What is important about this kind of talk is to ask the why questions, WHY. You know, in court, sometimes the judges, they don't get to hear the why answers. Why are you insisting to sell the house, right? You must pay your debt, but how much does that entail, right? Are you sure selling the house will solve your problem? Some of these answers are never, and when you're in war mode, by the way, one reaction is, why should I tell her the reason? This is my right. I have a right to the house. I want to sell the house. And she's thinking, why would I want to hear his explanation? I don't believe him. I don't trust him. Okay, so when you're in war mode, all these things doesn't really work, right? That is negotiation. Mediation. Now, of course, communications can be very difficult between two parties, right? And you will find in none of our slides, we will say easy. You know, we say good, but we never say easy, right? It will be hard. When communications are so difficult that negotiations cannot take place, mediation tend to work, okay? The main difference between negotiation and mediation is the mediator. This mediator is a neutral party, okay? He doesn't tell you what to do. He doesn't tell you how to do, right? His main job, again, is to teach you how to communicate, or to help you how to communicate more effectively to the other party, and to help you try to get what you want, okay, through this kind of communication. And in mediation, he is also what I call the receptacle of information, because there are things that you say and then you will anger the other side. So you can have private sessions with this person, and this person is not allowed to tell the other person, all right? But he will understand, oh, why you need to do things a certain way, okay? So for those of you who are skeptical about mediation, let me tell you the statistics of successful, and I mean successful means things are settled, either fully or partly. The percentage is a staggering 90%. So don't underestimate the power of mediation. It can really work. Right? And the other thing about this tool, a very short conclusion, is that, believe it or not, this is a way to rebuild trust. Why do I say that? Remember the honest and open communication. Okay, so we encourage parties to be honest about what they say. If you say you have salary this much, bring your payslip to prove it. right? If you say your bank account is this amount, bring the bank statements. These days, with the click of a button, you can get CPF statement, you can get bank statement, you can get IRAS, right? So they are all very easy to fulfill. Once you're honest about things, the trust will happen. Okay, that's why peace mode is can be very powerful. Yeah,
I like that. Yeah. Okay, I completely agree. So why in this case, I mean, it sounds like a very attractive idea for all kinds of disputes. But it seems the family court is taking the lead in this. And I'm just curious why you feel in the cases of divorce, this peace mode approach, or the courts label it the therapeutic justice approach, is so important that the family court sort of gets special treatment, you know.
For me, right, it all boils down to the word family. Okay, like family disputes get special treatment because of that word, family. Because in this kind of relationships, all the more you don't want to worsen it. Like I said, you may not be husband and wife, but parenthood is a lifetime journey, right? And then, you know, I have seen with my own eyes, very loving parent-child relationship. Through divorce, the child don't talk to the parent for decades, you know, until they grow old, 40, 50 years old. There are grandparents they don't see ever until the wake, if you know. So it is very, very sad if we don't arrest this early, okay? Not just lifelong, it's generation long, right? And that's why I think people are anxious. Authorities, courts, parties, they are anxious to see, hey, there's got to be a better way to do litigation, divorce litigation. Is litigation really all that? Perhaps it's always been the wrong way to practice.
Yeah, that's interesting. Perhaps it was. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, Sylvia, I was just thinking as well. I mean, listening to what Susan had to share. When you advise clients who are, what do you think is the most helpful thing they can do for themselves in the midst of negotiations and mediations? I'm not sure if you've been in a situation where, you know, clients are in the middle of those things and then they are still ongoing seeing you for counseling. Yeah. What typically is the state they're in, and what do you normally do to help?
Yeah. So yeah, definitely there was a state when they are, I mean, when I was working in the family courts, I was, you know, with the counseling and psychological unit, we did a lot of counseling for people who are in the middle of negotiation, in the mediation stage, you know, and they, so usually at stage, there's a lot of fear. They are very scared of losing things. So number one is like losing the child, right? If there's children involved. Or losing, you know, the assets, the division access. So the fear and anxiety is really, really high. And often when you're in a state of fear, you know, your brain doesn't, you know, something happens to your brain neurologically, all your stress, cortisol, is all firing up. Okay, and how you thinking clearly becomes a problem. You know, and confusion is the stage. So that's the challenge. The difficulties why even at this stage is you know, having counseling is important because you need someone to help you through to talk through the emotions, how to deal with the feelings, but importantly to get really clear about the focus about what's the objective here. You know, when parties start to focus on their own needs, we know, am I going to get a bigger portion or what? They forget about the kids, you know, and so it's very important the process actually helps to remind parents to put kids in the center. So when we're going through the counseling when parties come for counseling at the family court, you know, there's a child-focused counseling. So the whole idea is always to bring the children in the middle, to help them to anchor about thinking about the children's needs, thinking about the children's emotional and psychological, not just the physical. Not just like which day the child go tuition, which day, how much tuition fees to pay, you know, it's a lot of emotional and psychological part that parents need to be able to work through. Because if parents are able to improve on the co-parenting, improve on the communication, reduce the war mode to get into the peace mode. That's what Susan was saying. It actually helps the children to feel like, it relaxes them. It doesn't stress them out so much. And children experience the parents in war mode. It's exactly like being in war. They are in fear also. They're scared. And so these things are important for parents to understand and to process it in the counseling stage.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Okay, let's move on from there. Now that we've talked about the peace and war mode and the importance and success rates of mediations and negotiations, let's help participants or by equipping them with some of the more practical things that they can do now if they happen to be in the stage where they are considering these things, right? So to the participants, if you have any questions on what we've been discussing so far, please feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Just throw in whatever questions you may have. If it's relevant and we are able to help, we will try to answer them all. So moving on, I'd like to talk about things you should and should not be doing, which is the next slide, 14 on our deck. So what should a person actively be doing when deciding whether or not to commence proceedings? Susan, would you like to talk about that?
Okay.
Like actual steps to take, practical stuff.
Perhaps, okay. I will talk about the steps first. All right. Practical decisions, actually that is maybe one step down. One step after this, things you could be doing or should not be doing. Let's talk about the practical steps first.
Okay.
For me, right, I mean, my experience, if I'm to impart anything, I feel like there should be resources devoted to preparing yourself for divorce. The same way you kind of prepare yourself for marriage, take the time to think long and hard. By all means, don't be shy to tell whoever is helping you, hey, I need time, right? Because you should take that time. And one of the things, right, that you want to think about is, okay, it's quite interesting because you are at stage 1, right, pre-divorce. What you're thinking is stage 3. That's how I see it, that you want to think about stage 3 post-divorce. Because the divorce process, you probably will need a lawyer to help you with. You think about stage 3, okay? What do you want to think about when you think about stage 3? If you have children, you want to think about, okay, what happens? Who's going to take care of them? Where am I going to get my financial support, right? What happened to our joint assets? You have built up this assets, the property is in 2 names. What do you see post-divorce? How do you do that? You like I said, and I will keep stressing this, right? You look at your needs. The kids need this. I need this. Okay, therefore, I look at what I have now, the income, the matrimonial assets. How do I see my needs being fulfilled? Don't, when you are going through divorce, your head is full of questions. Do this, which I always find, because it's been very useful for me. I journal, I have a little book. I pen down a lot of things, a lot of questions I have. Okay, especially when you're quite confused, right? You pen it down, it becomes real. Every day you forget, right? You read. And then one day you can find answer to question 3. The other day you find answer to question 1, right? Slowly, you will find some answers to some of these things. And of course, with help, with counseling, with legal help, more answers can be fulfilled, right? It's all these answers that makes you very confused. All these questions that makes you really confused. So pen them down, right? When and that's why when I say this again, right? When you see someone, an expert, counseling or lawyers and all that, what we can help, what will really help you is that we help you identify your needs. And then we talk about all your options, right? This will definitely lend a lot of clarity. And when you go to, say, finally you got all these things, you want to go to a lawyer, the lawyer will then navigate and find a way for you. Likewise for counseling, I believe. Okay, so these are the first few things you do. It may be very short as I talk about it, but when you're doing it, it's a long process, I believe.
it sounds like a long process. In fact, I was just curious, right? When you say, because it popped into my mind, I'm sure participants know, but what is a kind of like a typical kind of question that would leave someone very confused, and it's something that you would recommend, write it down?
Yes.
Are we thinking like very practical things like who gets the car? Or are you thinking about the broader, I don't know, psychological kind of questions?
Yeah.
Maybe can I suggest like maybe something things like, this example for children, right? Why would you want care and control, and or what are the benefits of the children staying with you, or the benefits staying with dad, and listing out all the different options, with perhaps a different combination of variation, right? It could be like thinking maybe 1 week the child can stay with dad, then 1 week the child stay with mom, or treat, or stay with mom, and then weekends. So you think about all the different options, and then you write down the pros and cons, and then that you can be very clear, and then to see that you thought through all the different options, and it's all laid out for you. So that's an example now.
I like that.
To further this example, I also would like to recast this whole needs question, right? You don't really just think about what my kids need, food, house, whatever. Actually, an obvious question sometimes when I talk to my client, they always say, yes, I know the kids need both parents. If you write down the kids need both parents, imagine the options will be circling around. How do I make sure they still have both parents?
Yes.
Right?
Like
So
that,
it's
yeah.
not just I need a roof over my head, that kind of thing, If you really write down and say, okay, that's the psychological part, maybe when Ian, you're talking about, hey, maybe we should also look at that kind of questions this way.
And include the why as well, Susan, right? You can tell the why. You can answer yourself the why, and once you could address that clearly, it can really help you to have, you're thinking about all the needs, all parties, yeah.
I like that. Okay. What about what a person should not be doing when deciding whether to commence divorce proceedings? Probably, I imagine someone in one of the stages of the marital breakdown psychologically. Are there certain, in your experience, you've seen clients do certain things that you wish, I wish you hadn't done that. I wish you hadn't made that decision. Or I wish you hadn't said that. What are some things really people should not be doing before they commence divorce proceedings?
Maybe can I share?
Yes, please, Sylvia.
Yeah. So I guess for the common one would be about how not to involve children in the divorce proceedings. That's some of the worst thing I've seen is when parents start to, when they want to gather evidence, then they start to do video recordings of their children, or get the children to say something against the parent on the video. So that sometimes that can happen. And of course, having escalation in your discussion. I think one of the worst things that can happen for kids is to see mom and dad fight, not just verbally, but also physically. One of the awful things about from what we know about research is that when children witness parents fighting, even from when they're babies, it can really affect their neurological, the brain development, because when you're in a state of fear, it actually affects the brain development. So actually, this is again been found out by research. So please, I think parents, of course, a different relationship, different issues, and especially with this domestic violence, do try to take heed to protect the children and not let children be exposed to it. If you do, make sure you get support. Go to the nearest FSC to get help. To seek help to protect your kids' life. Okay, but also try to, of course, there's different types of family violence as well. And sometimes people just one incident and then they go to the court and they go apply for PPO, and then it gets really like escalated, and so that's when sometimes counseling can help to de-escalate the situation, and try to reduce the tension in the house, or find ways to keep both parties safe and the child safe. But yeah, I think that's for me, my message is about exposing the children to conflicts, high conflict and violence at home. Yeah, that's just a big no-no for me. Yeah.
I
Anything to add?
want to
Yeah.
share a case I really that has impacted me a lot. As a young lawyer, I acted for an unmarried mother whose father, she said, neglected the child for 6 years. So when I took the case, the child was 6 years old, right? She denied him access. It was a very fierce fight, right? Eventually, he got access, but the moral of the story for me was that the child suffered all sorts of anxieties, right? She had problems in school. She had problems with relationship. Her relationship with her mother is always tense. And then she had a problem also. Every time she's anxious, she starts to pluck out the hair. So half her head was bald and she had eyebrows. Okay.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And that's all the way till she was, all the way till she was 16, 17. But what really impacted me was one day, I think she was 18, I got a call from the mom. And it was again about an issue. Can you imagine, the issues never stop? Huh? Every year I'll get a call about this or that. She said to me, Susan, I really regret taking care and control. Okay, so perhaps she said it out of anger. Perhaps she did. But what the message for me, if I want to impart anything, right, is that you can fight for the child, but that child that you've eventually fought for will be full of problems, full of anxieties, and you will have your hands full. If you don't share some of these co-parenting responsibilities, you yourself might not be able to cope, So just know what you're really fighting for before you go into this onslaught of mudslinging and all that kind of things that's going to hurt. There's a term for this. It's called triangulating the child. I mean, Sylvia, where the child feels like mom or dad forever is going to be like this.
Yeah. So the level of stress and anxiety on the children is very high, and what Susan described with the hair plucking is not all kids experience that, but they can manifest into behavioral problems. You might start seeing kids having more like running, just having difficulties managing their emotions. They get anger outbursts. They might start to don't want to go to school. Or some may even want to become more withdrawn. Some parents are seeing the children suddenly stop talking, and hiding in their rooms all the time, gaming all the time, refusing to engage. So these are, kids are going through that really emotional difficulties already.
Yeah.
And I've seen some kids have really a lot of difficulties articulating. They have difficulties processing, talking their emotions. They're like stuck inside their shell. So, because it's not safe for them to express or talk about it, because they feel like, oh, if I say something, am I going to upset my mommy, or am I going to upset my daddy? I love my daddy, but mommy don't let me see my daddy, and I'll feel really bad, and I don't know who to choose. So they're in a lot of stress, and then that's when the grades start to deteriorate. The teacher will say the child always daydreaming in class or having issues. So these are they are run-on effects of high conflict. Yeah,
that's excellent reminder. I think at the very least, the takeaway is, escalating the situation pre, during, or after divorce is really the most unhelpful thing probably that can happen. Yeah, especially for the children. So yeah, that's really interesting. So let's move on to practical decisions, which earlier, Susan, you were saying is slightly different from my earlier question, which was things you should or should not be doing. So some practical decisions that can be made, assuming the decision of the party is to go ahead with the divorce. Any thoughts on what needs to be done before these two parties maybe, I don't know, come together for the negotiation stage? So I imagine this is probably when they come and see the lawyer or even the counselor.
perhaps when I was talking about the practical things to do, right?
Some of that came up, because we talked about
Yeah,
list your questions on piece of
correct. So I
paper.
think maybe then I will kind of want to go back to the things that you must try and do, say if you are going to have a fruitful discussion. Okay, because that's what I think, and then maybe to say some of these things you must not do apart from using the children as a weapon and the legal effect of all these things when you have a settlement. Perhaps that might be helpful for the audience. Three things that I was trying to advocate, right, that you want to try and make sure you do is you must know the full facts. Okay, and you must have an open, honest, be prepared to have open and honest dialogues, right? And of course, make decisions after you have thought through it and in the right emotional state. Okay, so I'm not sure whether these are practical decisions, but these are the things you want to try and do. Okay? Right. And if I may elaborate quickly, what is no full facts, right? Really, these 2 points has a direct impact on whether the settlement is going to be enduring or not. This is how I feel, okay? If you understand, appreciate the full circumstances under which you're making a decision, right? Life-changing decisions, mind you, you must know, it must be very transparent, okay? You must know exactly what's going on. Because buyer's remorse or regrets is one of the most common things that happen in divorce cases, okay? Today they decide that this is all right, tomorrow they'll say, no, it's not all right. I will give you a case study, a very short one. It's about a husband who found out his wife has an affair, right? And he decided to confront her. And she kept denying it. The more she denies, the more he wants a divorce because there's no honesty in the relationship. She started divorce proceedings and then he showed her the PI report. And that's when she said, okay, let's talk. When they finally decided to talk, it was about why that happened and how to salvage the marriage. They decided to save the marriage, go for counseling because they have kids, right? On top of that, I think they still love each other. Decided and the husband withdraw the divorce proceedings. And that is what I meant by knowing all these things, meaning you confront the affair, you know that your wife had an affair, but you are still willing to forgive and try to start everything again. Imagine if he believes she didn't have an affair, withdraw the proceedings, only to find out that's not true. The regret will set in. Okay, and that is why people keep going back to court. Because I didn't know he had so much money, so I agreed to this. But actually, you know, if you know that he earns $8,000, you're prepared to take $2,000. Later on, you say, okay, actually he earns $80,000, but I'm still prepared to take $2,000. Which decision will be the one that is not going to cause you any regrets? It will be the one that says, I'm prepared to accept. This is what I call decisions made eyes wide shut, right? You know the full facts already, but you say, okay, I'll compromise because I don't want to fight, right? So that's the three, I feel is the three things that you must do.
Interesting.
Things that you must do. I want to quickly also jump into the things that you mustn't do because we talk about using children as a weapon.
Yeah.
We talk about making emotional decisions. We talk about pressuring the other party. There's also this other thing you mustn't do, which is inaction. Somebody filed a divorce, then you totally don't want to do anything about it. I tell you why these are things that you mustn't do also. Because again, it's about regret. If either one of these parties regret agreeing under this kind of circumstances, do you know that the top three, right? Emotional pressure, use children as weapon, are actually grounds the court can look at to say this settlement agreement is not valid. Yes, that is also again why people keep going back to war mode. They keep fighting because it's like, hey, not fair, what, right? You forced me. I thought you were going to take the children away. So these are the things that you mustn't do. Okay. Yeah, I really want to stress this because it's important when you're trying to decide because this happens way too frequently.
The inaction one is also interesting, Susan, because you mentioned that don't do nothing. So what might be the consequence of that?
Okay, don't do nothing. Firstly, by the way, for those people where the other side don't do anything, it doesn't mean he consent. Silence is not consent in law, all right? However, for the person who decided, oh, I want to bury my head in the sand, I want to sweep everything under the carpet, right? That's a bad idea. Because if you don't tell the court what your side of the story, a lot of the court orders can be very against you. It can be things that you cannot fulfill. But you didn't go to court to face up to it, right? Right? A lot the court order says you have to pay 500. You cannot afford to pay. The wife makes you a bankrupt, or the ex-wife makes you a bankrupt. In the end, your life will become from bad to worse. That's my advice. And divorce is not something you should ignore. You should confront, you know. It's painful, yes, but please actively participate. Otherwise, the consequences is usually not good for you. Doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good one. Completely agree. Okay, let's quickly jump on before we do Q&A. I just want to mention two more things quickly. One is broaching the question. So assuming that now, you know, after having heard everything, we've got participants who may say, okay, I'm sure I want to go ahead with the divorce. Any advice on how they should broach the topic with their spouse before we move on to the children? I mean, how do you, I can imagine in some circumstances, it might be quite a terrifying thing to tell your spouse that this is what I want. Yeah, especially in circumstances where maybe you think the spouse is not expecting anything. So Sylvia, do you have any advice how they can prepare themselves? How they can broach the question?
Yeah, so so definitely, I think again it depends on how you are in your relationship, you know, the dynamics. For most
Is
people,
there like some basic? Yeah, I don't know. I guess not.
Yeah,
Maybe. It does depend on the
yeah.
relationship.
I mean, I mean, of course, try to. I mean, in discussion, make sure that you're, you know, emotionally calm and in a good, you know, state, and you're very clear. Sometimes, you know, both parties can be, you know, coming to the stage where, because you know that the issue's been going on for a long time, and they both know that, you know, that the marriage is not going anywhere. So bringing it up is like, it could be easier with both parties to actually talk about it, and they actually can agree that, yeah, it's not going to go anywhere. So yeah, but it's often not so clear cut, because usually there's sometimes it's one person that wants it more than the other. So that is more really difficult.
I ask because I imagine this is what will kickstart the whole divorce process for some, right?
Yeah.
So then the other one would be, do you tell the children? And is there any benefit or disadvantage to telling family members? Is there an obligation to tell, like, the in-laws, your parents? Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, you know, definitely telling the family members, it can be helpful, and also can be unhelpful too. But the helpful part is you can get support from your family members to know that you're going through a difficult time, and the family members can support you through, you know, if you need, you know, for example, practical care needs, like you need to help with the care of the children, or start thinking about this kind of things. So, and emotional support as well. When with children, definitely it's good to talk about it when it's clear, when you're definitely sure about the process, because and it's good when both parties actually come together and speak to the kids together, you know. So, and to explain to the children that, you know, telling that the kids that, you know, it's not their fault, you know, and mommy and daddy have decided to live separately because you know, it's our adult problem, you know, but we decided they will do that, and this is what the arrangement will be. So having that clarity and actually assuring the children that, you know, that you both still love, you know, that the child can still love both of them, and, you know, that the child can have relationship with Papa and Mama, you know, and the child can see both Papa and Mama, you know, and that kind of messaging is important for the children, because they're scared of losing the parents as well. So when you broach this topic to the children, it's really giving them the assurance that actually, as much as possible, we're trying to keep things the same. The only difference is that mommy and daddy will not live in the same house, and you might have to live in two houses, and this is what it might look like, you know. And but so Yeah, so that conversation is ideal. Yeah.
Interesting. That leads nicely to our next and final discussion before we move on to Q&A. Meantime, if you have any questions, please send them in. The children, right? Because I think that this is the one relationship breakdown that involves like a third party that kind of has no say. So I just feel like compared to other litigation where there's an aggrieved party or like the two of us not happy with each other, and then we litigate in court. But often in families where there are children, there is this third party who is the child that's involved in this unhappy situation. So it just feels like everything gets more complex. So earlier we talked about psychological stages that a person goes through when a marriage breaks down. Do the children go through some of these psychological stages?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. It is another big topic, right, to talk about that. So children, yes, they will experience the grief process of what's going on with the mom and dad, right? The first stage of the denial stage or the shock stage, like how come my mom and dad are like this? And children also always sometimes wish I wish my mommy and daddy will not get divorced. They're hard for them to accept. But again, this depends on the age of the children. Some, especially the younger ones, they don't have difficulties understanding why. So they can be very confused. So this is like the first stage. And they can be in this first stage for a long time. Don't know why mommy and daddy divorced, right? Then of course, the anger stage, when children start to hear about or think about why the situation has changed, they can go through that as well. That how come I have to move house? Why I have to stay to two homes? I stay in a condo now, to move to HDB, or my life has changed. Why Papa do this? Why Mama do that? So the children can get angry too and upset, and then maybe they also go through bargaining stage to try to make the efforts to. Sometimes they get involved to try to do things to help mom and dad to stay together, and and then the last stage of the depression stage, the emotional stage, and then coming to acceptance. So yes, definitely children do go through the same stages. Emotionally.
So what would be some of the most important things that parents can do for their children at this point? When you see that your child, maybe it's in the middle of the divorce process, and you can see that your child maybe starting to change, and you start to feel concerned. What are some helpful things that a parent can do? Earlier, we talked about talking to them. But let's be realistic. Not every time you can maybe say that, don't worry, everything will be exactly the same. Mommy and daddy love you the same. I mean, the child might have witnessed some unhappy incidents.
Sure.
So in a very realistic setting, I'm sure there are still things that parents can do that will be helpful. So what might that be?
Yeah, so I think it's important to give the children assurance that yes, things are messy now, but mommy and daddy are working it out. So this is whether you consciously, of course, you need your intent is to want to go on a peace mode. So that's the messaging you can share with the child that we're discussing, we're working it out, and okay, so for some children who are maybe old enough, or maybe from 7 years old onwards or something. Earlier, Liyen, you said that, that sometimes the children's voices are not heard. Actually, you can actually still involve the children in a healthy way where you don't make the children feel like they have to choose, So when I was in FGC, and I still do it now, this process called child inclusive counseling, whereby we actually involve the child, still speak to the counselor, and my role is to actually assess the child. Number one, to see how the child is coping emotionally, and what's the child understanding about the divorce. So the child gets to speak to someone who is not mom and dad, and then he can freely share about what he or she thinks in a safe space, and also share about maybe some of the child may have some thoughts about how they want to spend time with mom and how they want to spend time with dad. What's important for them. So these are the space where the child can express the thoughts and feelings. And then my role as a counselor after that is to help parents understand the needs, emotional needs. Then from then, the parents using that to help them to think about, okay, then this is how I should think about the parenting arrangement to support the child's emotional needs. And then I can give them practical tools and tips about, okay, this is what you can say to the child or what the child requires. Maybe the child needs some consistency in the routine. I can help them identify what hasn't been going on right. I remember one case, this poor kid was like going back and forth the home, and Mondays, Tuesday stay at mommy, and Wednesday, Thursday stay with dad, and then the homework doesn't get passed up, and then it's so confusing for the child, and then the routine changed next week. So the child is really anxious and confused. So when that was fleshed out in the counseling, then I can advise the parents that, hey, this is not helpful. Okay, so let's just have a proper structure out for the child.
Right.
So yeah, so this is where the voice of the child comes in.
Yeah. Very helpful. Susan, I believe you have something to add to that on the children.
I want to say this and I only do this. I only can say this because I watch interviews of children, or rather grown-ups, and when they were children, they experienced divorces, and many of the children said these things like, "I wish my parents have been open about this and explained to me properly." Okay, what had happened, because a lot of parents say, "No, the kids don't need to know the details or whatever." Don't need to give the details, yes, but they still kind of need some explanation. Number one, okay. Parents who stay together, and there were some who said, "I wish they divorced earlier." And this is important, I think, because the kids often, they think of all sorts of things when you don't explain to them, right?
Yes.
And then sometimes they blame themselves. And especially if you stay in a marriage, you say, "I stay because of the children." Sure, they will say, "Hey, I'm the reason why they're always fighting." Right? So I just want to share this with the participants about how your children may be feeling.
Yeah. Okay, on that note, I think really we've discussed a lot today. So I just want to very quickly answer some of the questions. Some of them are, of course, quite legal. For example, someone's asked here, let me just see. If both parties consent to a divorce, how long does it take to finalize? And is there a need to go to court if there is consent by both parties?
Very quick answer. If you consent to a divorce, timeline and everything is agreed, stage A, stage B, timeline is 4 to 5 months from the date you file. Okay, very, very, very fast. I used to coin a word for this kind of divorce. It's called the Mac divorce, meaning it's like going to McDonald's and get the fast food. All right, very fast, very cheap, no hassle.
Right.
Do you need to go to court? The answer is no need.
The lawyers will
dispense with attendance.
Right.
Yeah. Divorce, annulment, you still need to go to court.
Right.
All right. But so those cases are very rare.
Okay. Sylvia, this is an interesting question. I never thought of it that way, but this participants asking, are personalities of the individual parties relevant, or should they be considered before suggesting maybe whether the lawyer suggests or the court suggests that they go for counseling? Does it matter what their personalities are?
Yeah, so it depends on, so personalities. So the question is whether they should go for counseling, is it? Whether that makes a difference?
Yeah, or whether you actually have some people where you say don't go for counseling. That's what I'm imagining, but I'm not sure if I understand.
Oh yeah. So there are some circumstances when counseling may not be so helpful. Okay. It can also be coupled with personality issues. Okay. So yeah. So some circumstances when there is, for example, clear like a long history of maybe domestic violence,
Right.
and when there's some safety issue, that maybe not be so helpful, but you can do maybe separately. Okay. Yeah. So sometimes personality issues can make it very difficult because we're not treating the personality issues, but at least from counseling, we can actually we can try to bring some communication strategies, learning how to manage emotions a little bit better. And I think sometimes it's difficult, right? I mean, it could be personality, but it actually could be addressing underlying long-standing emotional unresolved hurts that has been there, right, for a long time, but people call it personality issues, but but it may not be the case, right? So to counseling is a way to actually to deal with that. So once the emotional issue is dealt with, unresolved emotional hurts or something, you know, buried years for a long time, then suddenly the personality issue goes away, you know. So yeah, that's where counseling can be helpful. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, one last question before we move on. It sounds like quite a practical question. So maybe Susan, you can deal with this and then we can close. This person says, I have signed a draft interim judgment and consent to simplified divorce 2 months ago, but he hasn't filed it yet. What are some of the possible reasons for this and how can I help to expedite the process?
Oh.
It's interesting.
It's
Signed
like
but
asking
not
me
filed.
to read the minds of the the guy, or it could be so many reasons. I don't even know what to start. For example, he might eventually not be ready to file because he's the initiator. Some silly reasons like maybe too busy, lawyers too busy, whatever, you know. But if it's a simplified divorce, if you want to help, I'm afraid the person who files it has to be the applicant or the plaintiff. So in the simplified divorce, what you have signed, you are already the defendant. So maybe you cannot file it on his behalf. But if he's having issues with his lawyers or getting it done, perhaps you can take over and say, hey, why don't I talk to your lawyer or facilitate it? I will try and file it for you. You see if that works, because simplified divorce means everything has been settled. You just want to get it, filed. So maybe that's what you can offer to do.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that was helpful. Okay, unfortunately, we have to bring our panel discussion to a close. We really hope you found this webinar is now the right time, useful. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on your browser, and your feedback will really help us make future webinars more relevant and useful. So we greatly appreciate if you fill in the survey form. Susan and Sylvia, thank you so much for spending the evening with us and for your valuable insights. Any short takeaway before I close?
Perhaps a very short one.
Okay.
Sylvia said that domestic abuse and violence may not be suitable for counseling. Perhaps not, maybe not even the peace approach. I just want to have a little disclaimer here, because domestic violence or certain behavior, aggressive behavior, certain kind of abuse, it's not a topic that we're covering today. Doesn't mean that it cannot go through the peace approach, but it may not be so straightforward. Okay,
right.
But that's something else altogether. Don't think that, just because we don't cover means it's okay. The other thing I just want to say is this person asked the question. I have put down a very simple answer. Yes, I cannot answer completely because it's the end of the session already, but I hope that suffices lah. Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much, Susan and Sylvia, for spending the evening with us, for your valuable insights. And on behalf of Law Society Pro Bono Services and the Family Justice Courts, thank you all the participants for joining us today. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.